Hey, folks. It's been a long time, hasn't it? Finally get to see. To, y- mm, meh, meh. You finally get to hear me talk over a friggin' picture and read a fan fiction because that's all I'm good for. It's either playing video games or fucking reading. Sorry. Sorry for swearing.
Sorry for swearing. I don't usually swear. I'm Christian.
Yeah. We now return to your previously scheduled Shinji and the Doctor, everyone's favorite, the favorite fan fiction that you barely see get updated because it's been fucking years. Sorry. Again, okay, it hasn't been that long. It's only been like 1 year. I mean, you'd think there'd be a new chapter, but no, no. But we now return to episode 5, Parent-Teacher Conference. Part 7. Is my child organized? Third floor hallway. A lot of things happened at once. Misato tackled Shinji to the ground, shouting something. A desk came hurtling over his head, scattering the first of the horde like 9 pins. He heard the crack of Mr. Kongo's shotgun going off. He could see the not zombies charging towards him. Stay back! The doctor shouted. Everyone just stay back! He rushed past Shinji, dragging the fire extinguisher behind him with both hands. He spun around and tossed it into the middle of the crowd. It bounced off the ceiling and disappeared into the mob. There was a hissing sound. A blast of dark smoke flooded the hallway. Through the haze, Shinji could see the shadows of figures twisting and milling about in confusion. He felt Misato pull herself off of him and stand up. The smoke started to clear. The horde lay in a twitching pile on the floor. A handful still meekly attempting to crawl down the hall. Beyond them, he could see Kensuke, eyes practically bulging through his glasses, attempting to push a masked high schooler twice his size off of him, while Hikari looked on nervously from the classroom door. Behind him, further back by the bend in the hall, Ray paused, a desk suspended over her head with one hand. The doctor stepped past Shinji and went to the side of the closest not zombie. He felt his wrist for a pulse, then stood back, satisfied. Well, he said, think we can call that a successful field test, can't we? Classroom 3B. Shinji carefully dragged the tall girl, her broken arm set with a yardstick and scotch tape, back into the room the horde had emerged from. Rubble lay strewn everywhere, including a massive chunk of concrete embedded into the floor. Just above it was a large gap in the ceiling at least 1 meter in diameter. He stepped over the unconscious not zombies and made his way back to the newly completed barricade by the classroom door, where the others were waiting. That's the last one, right? Yep, good luck. The doctor turned to Misato. I've got a few more extinguishers filling up down the hall. I can't tap the vents for the entire building from here, so we'll need to get them to the roof somehow. How many do we have? 5 total. Figure we should have at least one here in case there's any more trouble. Fine. Mr. Kongo? Misato said. I want you to stay here and watch the students. You too, Ray. Ray nodded. Continue to maintain contact with command at all times. The doctor and I will go out and attempt to flush out the building through the air conditioning system. Mr. Kongo shouldered his rifle. Sounds easy enough when you put it that way. She looked at the doctor. Any objections? Nope. Question, though. The doctor pointed to the knife on Misato's belt. Meant to ask, what's that thing anyway? You never said. This? Misato unclipped the box cutter-like item and extended the blade. It seemed to glow slightly. Or maybe that was just the trick of the light. Nerf prototype. It's a personal-sized version of the progressive knife we use on the Avas. We've been evaluating it for mass production. Shinji nodded to himself. That's why the knife looked familiar then. The doctor eyed the blade thoughtfully. Huh. Monofilament carbon nanotube wire accelerated around a superconductive magnetic core, using sonic vibrations to shape the cutting surface. Nasty. Should beat out my Ginsu kit something fierce, though, I'll give it that. Misato retracted the blade. How soon will the chemical be ready to move? Shouldn't be too long now, though... The doctor snapped his fingers. Almost forgot. One last thing to take care of. Classroom 3A. Shinji unsealed the empty jar, or at least it looked empty to him, and held it under Tomoe's nose. Behind him, the doctor handed another glass container to Hikari. Pure oxygen, he said. Keep it away from any sparks or flames. Might help clear out her airways a bit. Hikari gave him a slight bow. Thank you. No trouble, though. 1 second. The doctor glanced around. Now that Shinji thought of it, seemed like everyone was grouped towards the back of the classroom, even the third years. Why are you all up here? After they came through the ceiling like that, wouldn't it be safer to stay towards the... Shinji glanced towards the door. The only person there was Rei. She stood against the wall, arms crossed. The doctor groaned. Tell me that you're joking. She opened a steel door with her bare hands, Hikari whispered furiously. Toji nodded in agreement. And those desks weigh like 60 pounds. What is she, anyway? Kensuke asked. Some kind of advanced battle android? Shinji looked at Rei again, who was, in fact, shorter than him, and who didn't look particularly strong or well-built. Actually, he had to admit that was kind of freaky. The doctor sighed and rubbed his eyes. Ugh, humans, of course. He turned to the other students. Right, you lot, listen up, because I'm only going to say this once. You got 2 options. 1, you can spend all your energy fearing and shunning her because she's different. Or 2, you can wake up and realize that she's been actively risking her life to save yours this entire time. My advice to you is... He leaned in. I'd pick the one that keeps you on a good side. The class stared at him in silence. The doctor straightened up and adjusted his tie. Right, think on it, will ya? Might be a quiz later. He stalked out of the room. Shinji glanced at Rei again, then hurried to follow. 3rd floor girls' bathroom. Misato stared at herself in the reflection in the bathroom mirror. Don't think, she thought. Don't think about all this crap right now. Don't think about Shinji. Don't think about what we've been putting him through this whole time. Don't think about Rei, or what might have made her the way she is. Don't think about Antarctica. Don't think about Dad. Don't think about the scars, or the blood, or the feeling of metal moving around inside your flesh. Don't think about the hospital. Don't think about your room, or the eyes on the other side of the glass window. Always there, always watching you. Don't think. Act. Get him out of this. At least get that right. So what's first? She asked the mirror. She reached for her cell phone. 3rd floor hallway. They wound up waiting for Misato in the hallway outside of the bathroom. So, should we knock or something? Shinji asked. Nah, bad idea, trust me. Especially when they're armed. The doctor grunted as he pulled on the backpack they stuffed 2 of the fire extinguishers into. They were obviously fairly heavy. Shinji had only just been able to carry just one of the canisters by himself. Another pack containing the other 2 extinguishers sat nearby on the floor. Shinji glanced around the hallway. He lowered his voice and held out the little leather wallet the doctor had shown Misato. You left this in the lab. The doctor snatched it. Oh, that's right. Cheers. What is it, anyway? I didn't say? The doctor pocketed the wallet. Psychic paper. Shows people what you want them to see. So, Misato and the others, they can actually see something on the card? Shinji wrinkled his brow. So, why can't I see any? Rei coughed. Shinji shut his mouth and turned around. It was odd, actually, he thought, just how quickly he was getting used to her sneaking up on him. The doctor looked up. Miss Ayanami, what's the word? Barricades remain stable, she said. No sign of enemy activity. Sort of guessed from the lack of screaming, yeah? She didn't say anything. Is that all then? The doctor shot Shinji a confused glance. He could only shrug in response. Ray let out a sigh. The doctor raised an eyebrow. Something wrong? The first law of robotics, Ray said quietly, in perfect English, is that a robot cannot harm a human or by inaction allow a human to come to harm. Shinji's jaw dropped. The doctor grinned. Good ol' Isaac, he said. But you're so much more than a robot, aren't you? She looked away. I always preferred his non-fiction, to be honest. Shinji looked back and forth between the two of them, his mouth open. Misato strode out of the bathroom. Everything ready? Yes, ma'am. The doctor pointed to the backpack on the floor. Misato hefted it onto her back and, without another word, marched away down the hall. The doctor glanced back at Shinji and Ray. Well, that's my cue, then. Stay safe, and whatever you do, make sure you keep that suit on and sealed. Got it? Shinji nodded. Right. The doctor cracked his neck and shot them a weary grin. Once more onto the breach, then, eh? That's Shakespeare, by the way. Henry V. Brilliant speech. We should cover it at class at some point. I'll have to remember that. He followed Misato down the hall. He probably won't remember that. I doubt he'll remember any of that. Yeah, the kids aren't gonna learn about it. All we know is that the doctor is just gonna forget about it, and then suddenly one day he'll be like, "Oh, I should teach English in this English class." Wait, what was I supposed to teach again? No. Classroom 3B. Kongo passed Misato a wooden stepladder. Good hunting, Captain Katsuragi. To you as well. Kongo nodded and stepped back. Two third-year boys pushed the barricade back into position. They stood alone in the ruined classroom. Misato extended the ladder and propped it next to the hole in the ceiling. So, the doctor said. Misato looked at him, her eyes darting nervously. The Little Mermaid? Really? Misato sighed. Can we just get this over with? Just saying, it's not bad. There's no Beauty and the Beast. Misato shook her head and started to climb up to the next floor. The doctor scratched the back of his neck and followed. Third floor hallway, outside the girls' bathroom. Shinji sat on the hallway floor. Rei stood on the other side of the hall, her arms folded. Kensuke came around the bend in the hall. Hey, Shinji, He saw Rei and stopped in his tracks. Shinji felt like he needed to say something. Kensuke, it's okay, really. So, Kensuke looked at Rei. You're not gonna pull off my limbs or something, right? Rei regarded him coolly. Only if I'm ordered to. Oh, Kensuke swallowed. Okay, and are the chances of that high, or... Rei shrugged. Yeah. Kensuke looked away. He sat down on the floor next to Shinji. She's not really like that, you know, Shinji said. I think it's just been a rough day. Yeah. Kensuke smiled and stared up at the ceiling. His smile faded. So, this is it, yeah? This is what war's like? I can't keep doing that voice. I can't keep doing that voice for Kensuke. So this is it, yeah? This is what war is like? I guess. I thought I'd really be better at this, you know, Kensuke said. You know, 'cause I've read all the books and everything. I thought I'd be prepared or something. But this, you know, actually being here, I just don't know how you do it, man. Shinji shrugged his shoulders. Try saying that. Try saying that 3 times fast. Shinji shrugged his shoulders. Shinji shrugged his... Okay, here's a challenge. Try saying that for whoever may watch this. Try saying that 10 times fast. Shinji shrugged his shoulders. Me too. Yeah. They stared up at the ceiling for a moment. So, Shinji swallowed. About that whole me smiling thing. Oh, yeah, forget about it, man. It's really not a big deal. Well, yeah, but I just wanted to explain. Shinji wasn't quite sure where all these words were coming from, but he kept talking anyway. I'm sorry if I freaked everyone out and all. I guess it's just that it's not like I'm enjoying this or like I wanted this to happen at all, you know? Because I really, really didn't, but usually when I'm this scared, it's just me and the Ava, you know? I mean, I can hear Misato and Rei and everything over the radio, but still, he shook his head. I don't know. I guess that's just kind of nice to not be alone when I'm this scared for once. Does that make any sense? Except that wasn't quite true, he thought. I didn't feel alone at Uenohara. I wasn't alone on the train. In fact, in the back of his mind, he heard the doctor say, "Well, you can wake up and realize that he's been actively risking his life to save yours this entire time." He banged the back of his head against the wall. Such an idiot. What? Kensuke looked at him. Nothing. Forget about it. Toji ran full speed around the hallway corner and skidded to a halt. "Oh God, there you are!" He turned wildly between Rei and Shinji. He looked like he was angry or about to cry, or maybe both. Shinji sat up. What's wrong?" "It's Hikari," Toji said. "She's gone." Outside classroom 2A. They stood around the first barricade they put up on this floor. Behind the pile of desks, someone had pulled back one of the fire doors just enough for someone about Shinji's size to crawl through. Excuse me. We saw her just as she left. Mr. Congo looked, if anything, a little embarrassed. She had that fire extinguisher Smith left behind with her. Must have grabbed it at some point when we were reinforcing the other room. Why the hell would she do something like that? Toji snapped. He started to pull down desks from the barricade. Come on, we have to go after her. Congo shook his head. Don't be a fool, son. There's nothing we can do for her right now. I'm kind of amazed she stayed this long. Shinji looked up. Tomoe stood weakly by the door to the third-year classroom, a blanket wrapped around her, leaning on Kobayashi for support. She was sitting with me when she got a text. Took one look at it and ran out of the room. It must have been from Nozomi. That explained the small hole. It had to be Nozomi. Who? Shinji asked. Her little sister. Tomoe coughed into her hand. Don't you know? She's in 1A. Aw, man. Kensuke stepped back, wide-eyed. Excuse me. What the hell does that mean? Toji asked. Her little sister was on the ground floor when this whole thing started. Kensuke rubbed his face with his hands. She must have been out there this whole time. Shinji looked up at Rei. What should we do? Rei let out a deep sigh. What? What? She looked at Shinji, though she wore the same expression as always. He couldn't help but think she looked sort of annoyed, actually. First law, she grumbled. And then Rei was in motion. She dove past Toji underneath the desks in the barricade and squeezed through the fire doors. In a blink of an eye, she was gone. They all stared at each other for a moment. Okay, girls, Toji said. Girls should not be allowed to be that awesome. He made to try and crawl after her, but he couldn't quite fit under the desks. Kensuke and Mr. Kongo grabbed him and pulled him back. Shinji stepped back. His head felt like it was spinning. He tried to think. What the hell were they supposed to do? What the hell was he supposed to do? Rei was strong and all, but what if? And then there was Hikari and her sister. He couldn't. And suddenly, just like that, he knew what he had to do. It was kind of obvious, really. Hold on. I need to do something quick. Hey, I'm back. Sorry about that. I had to. Sorry, I had to deal with someone. Now, where was I? And suddenly, just like that, he knew what he had to do. It was kind of obvious, really. He reached out and grabbed Toji's shoulder. Toji, listen to me. Toji and Kensuke turned to look at him, surprised. I need you guys to go and find the doctor and Misato. Tell them what happened. They'll know what to do, okay? What are you gonna do? Kensuke asked. Shinji took in a deep breath. I think something really, really stupid. Before Kongo could stop him, he crawled underneath the desks and through the space in the fire doors, the hazmat suit squeaking around him. I don't think you guys want the bonus material, so I'll skip that. And go to part 8. What can I do to help my child? The roof. I'm not gonna sing it. I ain't gonna sing it. You don't want me to sing that song? The roof. The doctor burst through the door into the open air. He scanned the rooftop. A few sheets fluttered on a clothesline, but no other movement. Come on, then. Misato charged up the last of the stairs, knife in hand. She'd lost her jacket at some point and picked up a nasty-looking gash on her shoulder. Naturally, there were at least 20 of that lot right on her heels. The doctor slammed the door shut behind her and jammed the lock. They paused to catch their breath. Well, the doctor said in between gasps. That was fun, was at least. Excuse me. He saw the corners of her mouth start to curl before she caught herself. The other lot started pounding on the door. It wouldn't hold for long. Where's the cooling tower? He asked. Up there. Misato flicked her chin at a large silver box on the roof of the hut over the stairwell exit. She pulled off her backpack and changed up her grip on the knife. Get to work. I'll hold them off. The doctor gave her a nod and ran around the other side of the landing, dragging her bag behind him. Meanwhile, in the basement, Hikari faded back into consciousness in the vague sense that she'd done something really, really dumb. God, her head hurt. Her sisters hadn't tried to get her drunk or something, had they? It would be just like them. She kept telling Kodama that she needed to be a better role model, but... oh, no. She sometimes had to be as much as a brat as... no. Ignore that as Nozomi. No, they're making her smaller. And now all she does is sing weeby anime songs. Nobody wants that. None of you want that. She opened her eyes. Everything seemed dark and blurry. She was being moved, dragged by the leg over what felt like a concrete floor. She weakly tried to pull herself loose, but her body didn't seem interested in listening to her at the moment. Where was the thing? She had this metal can thing in her hands. What's his name? The insane foreign hottie. He made it. The fire extinguisher. Where had it gone? She couldn't remember spraying it at those masked people things. It had been working, made them fall down, then she heard something behind her and she turned and then everything had cut out. She was in trouble here, wasn't she? She felt whatever was dragging her drop her leg. Hikari forced her eyes to focus. She was lying on the floor in the school's boiler room. Above her, in the dim glow shed by the emergency lights, she could see a thick fog of yellow gas hanging in the air. Oh God, her breath mask! She couldn't feel it on her face. No wonder she could barely move. There was nothing between her and the poison. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw one of the masked things, a burly construction worker, shuffle around her and rejoin the horde at the center of the room. A familiar voice whispered, "Hikari." She raised her head. Next to her, in the corner of the room, piled between a concrete wall and a massive pump, a handful of first-years lay prone on the floor. Nozomi was on the outskirts of the group, her cell phone clutched in her hand. She met Hikari's eyes, tears running down her face. It hit Hikari all at once. The fear, the panic, the ringing in her ears, the way her head felt like it'd been stuffed with broken glass. A wave of nausea sprang outward from her stomach. She forced it back down. Not going to throw up, she thought. Not going to scream, not going to cry. Going to be strong for my sister, just like Mom would have wanted. She reached out and took Nozomi's hand. She could do that, at least. Meanwhile, back on the roof, the stairwell door exploded open. Metal fragments scattered across the rooftop. The other lot came screaming out. The doctor steadied his grip on the cooling tower as the hut shook from the impact. "Here they come. Here they come," Misato said. She crouched down next to him, facing outwards. "Yeah, I noticed," he snapped. "Another human bomb," the fifth whispered mournfully in the back of his mind. "Another senseless waste of life." No. Misato turned back to him, a wolf-like smile on her face. "I mean, here they come!" A black helicopter roared up and over the edge of the roof. It passed directly over the horde. The rotor wash knocking the masked figures to the ground like a hurricane wind. In its wake, a duffel bag hurtled end over end through the air. Misato leapt up and caught it. She unzipped the bag and threw a gas mask at the doctor. "Put this on. They'll be putting down tear gas on the second pass." She pulled out a fairly large submachine gun and extended the stock. It occurred to the doctor that he was staring at her, his eyes wide, which really wasn't like him at all, and that he should really try and say something clever. But he swallowed. Gun? What?" "Don't worry." Misato pulled back the rifle's bolt and unlocked the safety. "Rubber bullets, I promise." Yeah, that's what Snake said. But then he shot someone in the face. Meanwhile, in the basement, Hikari heard movement somewhere in the room. The sound of feet shuffling in the dark. Something cracked. The masked high school student flew over the mass of figures standing over her and into the wall. He bounced off and fell to the ground, knocking down 2 or 3 others behind him. Then Ray leapt over the pump and landed in front of Hikari. "Ray?" Hikari flipped herself over onto her stomach. "Class Representative Horaki," Ray said, her voice muffled by her surgical mask. The construction worker reached for her. Ray grabbed his wrist and tossed him back into the crowd. "Can you move?" I think I could crawl." Hikari's vision started to blur again. She blinked her eyes rapidly. "But the others... I don't..." "Understood." Ray turned to the crowd. "I'll clear the room." She launched herself into the press, her hands and feet a blur amid the yellow smog. Meanwhile, back on the roof, the doctor slid the second extinguisher into the cooling tower and reached for the next. The gas mask pressed like a vise against his ears, but wasn't doing much to block out the cacophony around him. The helicopter hovered overhead, raining down tear gas and sponge grenades onto the assembled horde. Misato kicked the masked pensioner off the edge of the hut and fired off another burst from the submachine gun. Then there was all the noise inside his head. Yeah, ignore the stuff. Ignore whatever noise you hear in the background. Then there was the noise inside his head. "Don't bypass the heat pump, you simpering fool!" the sixth yelled in his ear. "You'll blow the entire subsystem!" Sometimes I think I should have just let Jamie catch me. The ninth considered the gas mask thoughtfully. Could have had one of those for free. Then there was the seventh, who just kept chanting over and over again, "Hate guns, hate guns, hate guns, hate guns, hate guns." "Bollocks," the eighth murmured. Huh? The doctor looked up. The eighth barely spoke at all these days. Why would he? There was the sound of a large explosion at the other end of the roof. Two small figures in school uniforms flew up out of a cloud of tear gas and latched onto the side of the helicopter. The doctor stared in horror. "Oh, no, no, no," he begged. "Oh, don't, please, don't." They detonated. The helicopter shuddered and wheeled away from the building, smoke pouring from its side. Misato shouted a curse. The doctor could only grit his teeth and turn back to the cooling tower as, all around him, the mob began to climb up onto the hut. Again, ignore the background noise. No one wants to hear the annoying sounds that the other people in the building make. Out of water. Meanwhile, in the basement, it was like a scene from a movie. That was all Hikari could think as she watched dozens of masked figures of all shapes and sizes being tossed about as if in a whirlwind. And at the center of the storm was Rei. She moved so fast that Hikari's eyes could barely keep track of her. One moment she pushed away the chin of a boy in a tennis uniform, sending him spinning away. The next, a quarter of a way across the room, she kicked the legs out from underneath a long-haired college student. The construction worker seized her upper arm from behind. Rei backhanded him in the face. He fell to the ground. As she pulled herself free, a pot-bellied bearded man in a long white robe struck her across the face. Rei barely seemed to notice. She took her attacker's outstretched arm, twisted around, and in a single motion flipped him over her shoulder onto the ground. Onto the floor. Sorry, I get words mixed up. I get them mixed up and I get them messed up. As she stepped back, Hikari caught a glimpse of her face. Rei looked as calm as ever, but her surgical mask was gone. She started to notice that about the same time. She covered her mouth and started to cough. Oh God, Hikari felt her heart sink into her stomach. Whatever Rei was, whatever she might be, the toxin worked on her too. Toxin! Rei edged back into a fighting stance, her hands held out in front of her. But already, Hikari could tell that she seemed to be moving more slowly. In front of them, another row of attackers marched out of the fog. Meanwhile, on the second floor, Rei was in trouble. Shinji didn't know how he knew it, or why he suddenly felt utterly certain of the fact. He just knew somehow. This is going to have to be it, then. He glanced around the empty classroom. He'd been hoping to get to the ground floor, maybe even outside, but he just barely dodged a big group heading up the stairs on the second floor landing. He could still hear them moving around outside in the hallway. Well, this was it then. It would probably help if he tried not to think about it too much. He sighed, hands trembling. He unzipped the hood from the hazmat suit and pulled it off his head. The doctor considered himself fairly good at multitasking, he had to admit, though, while trying to remotely program a Japanese air conditioning system with one hand while fending off a hipster-looking woman on the other, who seemed intent on gnawing the sleeve of his jacket off, no less, and was pushing things a bit. And then an unearthly scream, loud enough to be heard over the thrumming of the helicopter blades, resonated out from the bowels of the school. Hipster girl abruptly jerked back and turned away. Glancing behind him, the doctor saw the three masked fellows Misato had been fending off with the butt of her rifle climb down off the landing. The doctor stared in surprise as what remained of the mob below began to stumble their way back into the building. Where the hell are they going? Misato swatted him on the back of the head. Finish the job, she shouted through her own gas mask. All right, all right. Jeez. Is this the... No, I think there's one more. Back in the basement, again, a swarm of figures around Ray suddenly broke apart and turned away. They started to shuffle their way up the stairs and out of the room. Ray stood up straight and blinked. Behind her, Hikari released her ears and stared. Why were they? Where had that hideous screaming come from anyway? It sounded like it had been from above her somewhere. Then, through the multitude of moving legs, she caught a glimpse of a metallic gleam on the floor on the opposite side of the room. Ray! Hikari croaked. Over there!
The extinguisher.
Ray nodded. She dashed off through the crowd, dodging and weaving her way through the mass of figures. Lifting the canister in both hands above her head, she smashed it against the wall. The valve broke off and flew into the air. Oh no. How can we get really cheap free to play games online? We can't get those on GOG. They give us full games. The room filled with black smoke. Meanwhile, on the second floor, the door slid open. The not zombie, an almost comically scrawny boy who reminded Shinji a little of Kensuke, stood in the entryway. So you've been after me this whole time? Again? Shinji looked up from his seat at a desk towards the back of the room. Wow, what a twist. The not zombie stepped into the room. You don't say. Shinji tried to keep his voice calm. His knees started to shake. The not zombie took another step into the room. Then he shifted to the side and stopped in his tracks. Shinji stared at him. The not zombie stared back. Hurt. Another figure, a middle-aged office lady, stumbled in through the door. She stepped behind the first year and came to a halt. There was another behind her, and another behind him, and another, and another, and another one, and another one, and another one. Back in the goddamn basement, somewhere in the boiler room, a ventilation fan started up. The miasma above Hikari's head began to clear. Ray walked out of the fog, her left leg scuffing over the floor. She fell to her hands and knees, hacking and coughing. Her face and arms bore a number of nasty-looking bruises, and her uniform was torn and disheveled. She looked up at Hikari as the fit ceased. Status, she asked in a near whisper. Hikari glanced over at her sister and the other first years. They seemed to have passed out at some point, but she could see them breathing.
I'm okay. We're all okay.
I think. She hesitated. Thank you. Ray gave her a small nod, then lowered her head and started to cough again. As some of the smoke dissipated, Hikari could see dozens of unconscious bodies lying scattered across the boiler room. The only sound she could hear other than Ray and the hum of the fans was something on the far side of the room moving, coming closer. Meanwhile, back on the roof... There, it's done. The doctor pulled off his gas mask and leapt down from the cooling tower as the machinery started up. He prowled the rooftop. The helicopter circled around the building at a safe distance, smoke still belching from its side. The mob had cleared out completely, leaving behind a score and a half of unconscious figures and a few scorch marks here and there. But why would they leave? They just about had us. So why would they... He slapped his head. Of course! Misato yanked her own gas mask to the side. What? It's Shinji again. The doctor dashed for the door. No, wait, that was no good. The boy could be anywhere in the building. He pulled out the screwdriver and waved it around. He's trying for a sacrifice play just like the train. He's trying a what? You see what I meant about medication? The doctor scrambled back and forth across the roof, hoping hopping and vaulting his way over the scattered bodies in his path. Hold on, there's a transceiver in the hazmat suit. If I can get the signal back, I can triangulate his location and figure out which floor. No, he stops right there. Meanwhile, on the second floor... Excuse me. The air conditioner sparked to life. Oh, thank God. Shinji looked up to see the vents start to spit out black smoke. It seemed a little thin, though, compared to when the doctor had thrown the extinguisher upstairs, and the not zombies didn't seem to be affected by it. At least, not yet. Shinji rose from his seat and shrank back from the approaching crowd. The room was now half full, and they were still filing in one by one, not doing anything. Not so much as raising a hand in his direction. They just stood there once they arrived, watching him. Excuse me. Shinji could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He anxiously clutched the hood in his hands. Maybe this was enough. Maybe if he put the hood back on and resealed the suit, they'd just ignore him. He slowly raised the hood towards his face. Immediately, a high schooler leapt out of the mob and snatched it out of his hands. Hey, give it back! He weakly made a grab for the object. The high schooler retreated and vanished into the crowd. Shinji stared at his empty hands. Now what was he supposed to do? Meanwhile, back in the basement, again. A million times again. Hikari could only watch, tears leaking down her face as a massive form appeared from out of the smoke. Ray turned and, with a concerning amount of effort, rose into a crouch. The creature plodded into view. It. And Hikari didn't care what the doctor said. This was an it. This was a thing. She just couldn't think of it any other way. On first glance, appeared to be an immensely obese man, at least 6.5 feet tall, wearing the tattered remains of a subway worker's hooded jacket. Yet its head bore 3 different faces, with 2 placed over where its ear should have been. Its body was strange and misshapen, and its flesh was a patchwork of different shades and colors, here smooth and pale, there wrinkled and tanned, as if someone had grafted together chunks from different people into a demented quilt. It stopped about 3 meters away from them. 5 eyes looked down and blinked. Then its entire torso opened, from top to bottom, like a single terrible mouth. Muscles relaxed, organs and arteries pulled back, needle-like teeth retracted out of the way. A small figure, a first-year boy Hikari recognized from her sister's class, spilled out of its jaws and onto the floor, unconscious, a bone mass grafted to his face. The rightmost face let out a dull grunt. The thing stepped towards them. Classroom 2E. Back on the second floor again, folks. You're getting a lot of second floor action. Hurt. Shinji huddled in the corner of the room, his back pressed against the wall. They were all around him now, packed inside of the room. All of them softly chanting that same damn word over and over. His head felt as light as a feather. He could feel his entire body shake and twitch, the sweat pouring from his skin. This wasn't it. Wasn't it? This was it, wasn't it? He was really going to die. He thought that he was prepared, that he wanted this, but this... He hadn't been ready for this. He wasn't ready. He guessed, underneath it all, he just really wanted to believe in the doctor, hadn't he? That he'd win in the end and everyone could just go home. The mob went silent. He could hear something moving through the room towards him. He tried to squeeze his eyes shut, but they wouldn't move. He couldn't look away. A high school girl peered out of the crowd in front of them. No mask. Albino. She was really pretty, actually. She looked at Shinji. Hurt, she said. She bent down and put her arms around him. Hurt, she whispered in his ear. Shinji stood frozen on the spot. What? He squeaked. All around him, the nut zombies raised their heads and exhaled. The room filled with poison. The roof. Back to the goddamn roof. There! The doctor pointed the screwdriver down at the rooftop. He's right below us. First... He finished the calculations in his head. No, wait, second floor. Got it. Misato pulled the sling of the submachine gun over her shoulder. She took the knife off her belt. What are you waiting for? Call him to Chopper. It's its only chance. The doctor gestured furiously at the circling helicopter. Yeah, I said that wrong. Excuse that. Sorry, no time. Misato cut the clothesline free from its moorings and tossed the knife to the side. She reached down and pulled up the neat coil of rope. It suddenly hit the doctor what she was thinking. Oh, no, he said. No, don't you dare. Don't you even. Misato ran full speed towards the edge of the roof. She leapt over the railing and disappeared. The doctor dashed to the railing and peered over in time just to see her rappel down the side of the building. Much faster than should have been possible or safe without gloves. Meanwhile, second floor. There's a loud thump from one of the windows. Shinji looked up. The mob lowered their heads and turned. Outside, Misato hung from a rope by one hand, a gas mask on her head, her feet planted against the glass. She raised the rifle underneath her arm and fired. The window shattered inwards. Misato swung into the room and jumped into the mob, the rifle blazing. The doctor backed away from the edge, his hands running furiously across his hair. His hands running furiously through his hair. Come on, think. No time to wait down the chopper. Options. He needed options. He looked down and saw the progressive knife lying on the rooftop where the captain had dropped it. He swept it up and ran for the stairwell as fast as he could.
You had to be quick. Only a few minutes at most.
He turned down the stairs and immediately ran straight into the hipster girl. He took the opportunity to blow a rather large cloud of toxin directly into his face. Meanwhile, in the basement, Ikari desperately tried to get up off the floor. No good, she still couldn't move her legs. She couldn't run, couldn't even scream. Haraki. Ray slowly stood up. Close your eyes. What? I need you to close your eyes. Now. The thing was right in front of Ray. Just another step or two away. Please. Hikari took in a deep breath and shut her eyes. The last thing she saw was Ray stretching out her hands towards the monster, almost as if to embrace it. Meanwhile, back on the second floor, the room around Shinji was a blur of loud noises and violence. He tried to pull away from the albino girl. She latched onto him, her body pressed against his, almost in a death grip. Excuse me?
Hey guys, I'm back. I just had to make myself some dinner, and it's some vegetarian vegetable soup from a can.
Meanwhile, back on the second floor. The room around Shinji was a blur of loud noises and violence. He tried to pull away from the albino girl. She latched onto him, her body pressed against his, almost in a death grip, which was actually kind of nice, he had to admit, but still. Misato jumped out of the crowd and landed on top of a nearby desk. Small, vicious cuts all over her face and her arms. The albino girl looked up and hissed. Misato hit her in the face with the butt of her rifle. She fell back. Misato held out her hand to him. "Come on." Shinji took it. She pulled him onto the desk next to her, then turned and fired the rifle into the mob surrounding them on all sides. "Pocket of my dress. Cell phone," she said in between bursts. "Get it out. Call command. Helicopter outside." Misato? He held up her cell phone and showed her the large fragment of glass embedded in the battery. "It's not starting." "Oh, for God's sake! This is why I hate improvising." She flipped the switch on the rifle and sprayed the room on full auto. "Excuse me, I'm about to partake of some of the soup." And this soup tastes okay. Sorry. Meanwhile, on the fourth floor, the doctor blinked and pulled his finger out of the electric socket. He looked up and saw Toji and Kensuke staring at him, their mouths open. "Right, short-term memory loss? Sorry, what just happened?" I don't... Kensuke stammered. "You just ran in and scarfed down the sandwich you had, and then you..." Toji gestured to the socket. "Oh!" The doctor snapped his fingers knowingly, which hurt quite a bit actually, and leapt to his feet. "Enzyme cleansing. Needed the shock. Didn't have Dono around this time. Don't try it at home, by the way. Trained professionals only. Anyway, there was something else. Something important." He looked down and saw the knife in his other hand. Oh, not good. Double plus extra, not good." He took off running down the hallway. The boys followed after him. "Wait, doctor!" Kensuke gasped out. "Hikari and Rei and... they're... one thing at a time!" the doctor shouted. "Come on!" God damn. Back to the soup, folks. Maybe I should just turn on the microphone. Maybe I should just turn on the camera and just have it be me eating soup. The live stream. Sorry, I almost got something stuck in my throat. Excuse me. Back again. Meanwhile, back on the second floor, again. The rifle's clip ran out. Misato growled. The not zombies didn't seem happy either. They screamed and ranted wordlessly, rushing in from all sides, held back only by the piles of unconscious and broken bodies around the desk. They weren't exploding, at least. The doctor's smoke seemed to be doing that much. Here, Misato pulled the gas mask off her head and shoved it into Shinji's arms. Put this on. Misato, he said through chattering teeth. You've got to get out of here. They want me. I'm the one they're after. Misato looked at him in the eye and snarled,
Damn it, Shinji. I'm not leaving you alone. I'm not leaving you alone, Shinji.
Jeez, Misato, I don't know. I'm not sure about this. And that was my Rick and Morty impression. Feel free to not be impressed. Shinji stared at her. He tried to say something, but all he could seem to do was move his jaw up and down. With a final shriek, the horde charged at them, hands outstretched. Misato pushed Shinji behind her and swung the rifle like a club. Above all the tumult, he could still hear her ranting, You deserve better than this. You're gonna live through this. You're gonna find some way to be happy, even if I have to beat down every single stupid mask face with my bare goddamn hands. There was a hideous grinding sound above them. Part of the ceiling fell down onto a handful of not zombies. Shinji looked up. The doctor stood on the floor above them. In one hand he held the screwdriver, in the other he held the progressive knife, a length of extension cord wired into its hilt. He tossed the knife aside and reached down towards them. Come on, then! Misato grabbed Shinji by the scruff of his neck and pushed him towards the doctor's waiting hand. He took it, and the doctor pulled him up. For a second he could feel the mob's hands grabbing and clutching at his feet. Then the doctor, Kensuke, and Toji hauled him up onto the floor. He collapsed, gasping, onto the linoleum. He turned around. The mob was all over Misato now. A dozen hands pulling her down off the desk. She lost her grip on the rifle. In the meantime, another part of the horde was climbing and scrambling up one on top of another, reaching out for the edge of the hole. Clear the room! Misato yelled. With her one free hand, she pulled her handgun off of her belt and pressed it to the chest of one of her attackers. In a flash, somehow Shinji knew what she was trying to do. Detonate the horde. Take them with her. Don't, he thought. Oh God, please don't. Oh God, please don't. Not her, please. Oh no, you don't! The doctor roared. He pointed the screwdriver at the gun. The safety sparked and fused in place. He aimed it elsewhere. One of the air vents opened all the way and blew a massive gust of smoke right into the mob's faces. The horde recoiled. The doctor leapt forward, grabbing a hold of the edge of the hole with one hand. He swung down and latched onto Misato's arm. She kicked herself free of the crowd's hands. The doctor wrenched her upwards, his wiry frame straining, his face red. Soup. Ignore the voices in the background. Focus only on soup. Nice, delicious soup. That's all you care about. Soup. 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 All you guys can hear is me just eating soup. That's all you can hear. Nothing else. What was it again? Shinji reached down and clutched Misato's other hand. He felt Toji grab a hold of his belt. Together they pulled. They got her up to the breach's edge. She slammed her palm down and heaved herself and the doctor out. No sooner had they scrambled clear that Kensuke pushed a bookshelf down over the hole. It slammed against the floor with a loud bang, covering the gap completely. Shinji could still hear the mob screeching. Something thumped and scratched at the bottom of the turned-over bookshelf. Then the scraping stopped. The screams faded away to be replaced only with the rumble of air being pushed through the vents. Kensuke sat down on the bookshelf. That... He swallowed. An amazed, almost unhinged grin spread across his face. That just happened. Back in the basement again. You must not tell anyone about what happened in this room, Rei said. Hikari opened her eyes. Rei stood before her, covered from neck to toe in some kind of hideous dark-colored fluid. In her hands, she held the tattered subway jacket, which she'd apparently just used to wipe off her face. The air smelled like blood. There was no sign of the monster. Hikari glanced around the room. No sign of the thing at all, not even a body. What happened? What did you... Where did it go? You must not tell, Rei repeated. There's something different about her. Something in her eyes. Hikari couldn't quite place what it was. You must promise. Please. Hikari swallowed. Okay, whatever you want, Rei. I promise. Rei looked away, holding her arm. Something clicked inside Hikari's head. She knew what was different about Rei. For the first time that day, Rei looked scared. Excuse me. More delicious soup. I should just call this a soup stream. I could rename it, but nah. You're hearing soup. Nice delicious soup. Nice delicious, nice healthy soup. Remember, kids, soup is good for you. Unless you're allergic to tomato, in which case tomato soup's not for you. Maybe chicken noodle. Baby. Oh no. Meanwhile, on the third floor, Misato put down Toji's cell phone. Military's in the building, she said. They just found Rei and your friend in the basement. They're both okay. Toji breathed out. Oh, thank God. Thank you, Miss Misato. He sat down next to Kensuke and looked at him. Kensuke looked back, the same doctorish grin on his face. Toji sighed. Fine. He said. I admit it. That was kind of awesome. Shinji shook his head and turned away. He sat cross-legged on the floor next to the staircase, still in the hazmat suit. The doctor stopped next to him, stretching out his shoulder and wincing. So, Shinji asked, is it always about the last-minute rescues with you? Well, not always, the doctor said. Seems to work out like that pretty often. Yeah, besides, it's more fun that way. Shinji snorted and looked away. Somehow he just realized, in spite of everything, he was smiling again. Okay. Misato wearily pulled herself to her feet. That just leaves one thing. Oh, right, the knife. Sorry about that. The doctor nodded at the blade, which lay off in a tangle of exposed wire and extension cord off in the corner. Had to extend the wire a bit to get it through the floor. Might be salvageable, though. You never know. That's not what I meant, Misato said. She stepped closer to the doctor. Toji raised his eyebrows. What then? The doctor looked at her confused. No, seriously, what? Misato tilted her head and smiled coyly. No, Springs!
I can't do it. I can't do it, Morty.
Then she kicked him in between the legs. The grin immediately vanished from Kensuke's face. Shinji looked up at Misato in horror. Misato? He asked weakly. The doctor stood frozen in place, his face pale. He carefully swallowed.
Why? He said, why would you do that?
Misato jutted out her chin. You broke my gun. Why would you even see that being on the same planet as necessary? You broke my gun, Misato shouted back, and you stole my car twice.
But
The doctor sputtered a few wordless syllables. Oh, fine, all right, be that way. He collapsed down into a nearby chair, arms crossed. Misato turned and stalked out of the room. She's so scary, Toji whispered, a look of pure terror on his face. Scary hot, Kensuke murmured. Yeah. Shinji turned towards the doctor. Are you... The doctor waved him off. I'm fine, really. I mean it, I'm totally fine. He stood up. No, I'm not. He sat back down, a sullen expression on his face. Excuse me. That was the end of that chapter. Now, back to soup. Because I need to eat this soup before it gets cold. Sorry if you can hear that, but... This is what happens when you have food and you're wearing a headset. You might be able to hear someone eating food. It's delicious soup. Don't know why it has alphabet pasta though. Because it didn't say alphabet soup on the can. It said vegetarian vegetable. Now to the final part of episode 5. Part 9. Do you have any recommendations? Meanwhile, in Misato's apartment, the sun had nearly set in the sky by the time Misato had finally dragged herself back up the stairs and to her front door. Just about every inch of her hurt. She looked like a damn mummy for all the bandages the hospital had insisted on wrapping her up in. Her hands in particular were completely bound in gauze and anti-inflammatory cream. She'd lost a lot of skin from the rope burn, they'd said, so she had to type in the door code with her nose. He was waiting for her inside, feet propped up on the kitchen table, reading her newspaper. He'd changed his suit, at least. She paused, then walked past him to the fridge. So, she said as she pulled out what was undoubtedly the most well-deserved can of beer she'd ever had in her life. Is breaking and entering just a lifestyle choice for you or what? Didn't have a choice? The doctor flipped to the next page. Too many security cameras? You take down too many for too long, people tend to notice. You don't say. She sat down across the table from him. He flipped another page. No comics. He muttered, I don't understand that. Why would you make a newspaper without comics? Even just an editorial cartoon or two. She said, look, if this is about that one thing, I'm sorry. That was below the... Forget about it. He folded up the paper and tossed it aside. We'll just chalk it up to the heat of the moment, shall we? Just don't do that again. Ever. So, what are you doing here? Thought you said you didn't like monsters. Well, that is... He glanced down at the unopened can of beer in her bandaged hands. Are you going to need help with that? She waved him off. It's fine. I'll take care of it. Right, so... Business, then. He put his feet down on the floor and looked her in the eye. The hospital you mentioned, the one for the adult pilots. Was that true? She looked down. Yeah. He sighed and ran his hands through his hair. I was afraid of that. Nothing's ever simple. She tried to pull up the can's tab. It felt like sticking her finger in a vise. So, what, you were hoping we were just a pack of sadistic bastards using kid pilots for laughs or something? I wouldn't say hoping, but it just doesn't make any sense. He looked up towards the ceiling. You've got the resources of the entire planet at your disposal. Why wouldn't you take better care of 2 children? Look, what the hell are you expecting from me here? She slammed the can down on the table. Even if everything you've said is true, it doesn't change that we're in a fight for survival, and if I push back too hard against command, they'll just fire me and bring in someone else who doesn't give a damn about the pilots. And trust me, they won't have to look very hard. The doctor didn't say anything. She stared at the bandages on her hand. I'm just trying to get Shinji through this alive. Alive and intact, I guess. And the way things have been going lately, I don't even know if I could do that.
The room was silent for a moment. Then the toilet flushed.
Pen opened the door to the bathroom and plodded across the kitchen to the fridge. He, or she, maybe, after all these years of owning one as a pet, Misato wasn't entirely clear if cybernetically augmented genetically engineered penguins had a gender, opened the freezer and pulled out a sushi pack. She glanced over at the doctor, who looked remarkably unconcerned. Are you going to ask? Oh, we've met. The doctor waved his hand vaguely. Talked before you came in. Got into something of a political disagreement, actually. Pen let out a dismissive grunt and turned up his nose. He stomped back into his hut. He's a bird of strongly held views. The doctor grimaced as they watched him march out of the room. Blimey, nothing like getting the cold shoulder from a penguin, is there? Misato refused to laugh. She refused, damn it. Instead, she lifted the beer can to her face and pried open the tab with her teeth. The doctor turned to her as she took that first beautiful sip from the can. Whatever's been going on here, whatever they're trying to do to Shinji and Rei, you genuinely don't know anything more about it than I do at this point, do you? She took another sip and shrugged. Does it matter? If they've been mistreated, it's still my responsibility in the end, isn't it? I let it happen. The doctor looked away. His gaze settled over a pile of discarded discarded beer cans in the corner. A smile spread across his face. What? Look at this place. Practically nothing but cheap beer in the icebox, paint's already peeling in the living room, carpet doesn't match any of the furnishings, and not to be blunt here, but do you even own a vacuum, or, heard of one? Misato narrowed her eyes. You're really out to make me regret that apology, aren't you? He held up his arms. Okay, not criticizing, just an observation. It's not like my place is any better off, really, but the point I'm trying to make is, you did it anyway, didn't you? Did what? You took Shinji in. Gave him a home, even though you didn't have to, even though you can barely take care of yourself, let alone another human being. Watch it. But you did it anyway. You chose to care, when the easiest thing in the world would have been to throw up your hands and leave him to his fate. Misato Katsuragi, the one bright spot in this entire city for him. Yeah, well, she turned away. Not going to matter very much if I get him killed, is it? Well, the doctor crossed his arms. We're just going to have to make sure that doesn't happen then, aren't we? She chugged down the rest of the can, then set it down on the table. Maybe. Meanwhile, with the League of Evil in Central Dogma, do you really think you can deny responsibility for this incident, Ikari? A dozen black screens hovered in a circle around the office. They always drove Fuyutsuki up the wall. Here they were, surrounded by countless billions of yen and the latest telepresence equipment, including a state-of-the-art holographic projector the public wasn't allowed to know about. And the old bastards are all too paranoid to so much as be seen in the same room. They might just as well have set up a dozen 20-year-old televisions and called it a day. I deny nothing, the commander said. However, I believe I've expressed my concerns regarding external security to the committee in the past. The JSSDF is simply unprepared for the variety of enemy threats and tactics that we must face, as this incident has conclusively demonstrated, has it not? The Frenchman wasn't about to let it go, but the chairman cut him off. Fine, Gendo. The emergency extension to the defense budget is approved. However, you are to do no active recruitment on your own. Existing personnel will be transferred to you from other nerve branches. The commander didn't move a muscle. I have no objections. Then the meeting is adjourned. The screens vanished, leaving the two of them alone in the room. Well, that was a little too easy, wouldn't you say? Fuyutsuki said. You know the old bastards are going to use this to send as many moles as they can over here, don't you? Naturally. Gendo stared out into space. I've already arranged certain countermeasures. In the meantime, good work disrupting the JSSDF's communications today. I might not if you told me what it was for, Fuyutsuki snapped. The school, Gendo? Are you serious? Gendo shrugged. Katsuragi handled it. Regardless, it was a necessary risk. The committee has done its best to keep NERV as vulnerable as possible to conventional scale military attacks. That way that they could counterbalance us with the JSSDF at their leisure. Now they have little choice but to outfit us with our own private army. In addition, we gain valuable intelligence which might very well prove key to us in the future. Such as? The commander waved his hand. Two screens appeared in the air above his desk. One repeatedly looped through a clip of surveillance footage. An aerial shot of Captain Katsuragi and a tall man in a blue suit running across the school's rooftop. The other displayed a live video feed of a nerve science team combing through piles of junk in what looked like a chemistry lab. As always, old friend, he said as he studied the flickering images, you see, but you do not observe. Meanwhile, back in Tokyo 3, it had been a funny sort of day, hasn't it? Long day, very long, not to mention painful. The doctor rubbed his shoulder. That arm was going to be trouble for a while. You could tell, and limped around the corner to the alleyway where the TARDIS waited. As he felt around his shirt pocket for the key, he heard a cough. So, Shinji said. He sat on one of the dumpsters across from the TARDIS. The hazmat suit wrapped around his shoulders like a bright orange cape. Let me just make sure I have this straight. The doctor looked at him. All right? So the reason all of this happened, the train, what happened today, all those people who died or got masked. Yeah? All of that happened because some alien thing, which I'm pretty sure I killed, decided for some kind of crazy alien reason that it wanted to give me a hug and then kill me. Looks like it, yeah? Shinji shuddered. He pulled the hazmat suit a little tighter around himself and started to rock slowly back and forth on the dumpster. You gonna be okay? The doctor asked. The boy shrugged. I don't know. Can I ask you a favor? Sure. Could I still get that cup of tea? Shinji looked up. I think I've had enough of this universe for right now. The doctor smiled. Oh, I think that can be arranged. He snapped his fingers. The door to the TARDIS popped open. They walked into the blue box. So, Shinji said, if this place is bigger on the inside, does that mean there's more than just the one room? Oh, yes. Is there a padded one somewhere? One where I could, I don't know, what do you call it when you go, sort of temporarily crazy just for a little while? Nervous breakdown? Yeah, that would be great. Well, you'd be surprised. I know it looks like fun, but you'd be amazed just how boring it gets after a while. The doctor snapped his fingers again, and the door shut. Excuse me. Yeah, that's the end of episode 5 of the story. This, I guess the second part of episode 4 of this series. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time on another episode of the Fanfiction Reading Podcast. It's not even variety, it's just me reading shit. I will see you next time. Take care. Have a good night. Eat soup. It's good for you. Have some eatable soup. It's good for you, folks.